What's going on, guys? I'm super excited for today's video because it means I get to install my brand new rock sliders. I'm replacing my rock slide engineering steps because they just weren't quite as tough as I was hoping they'd be. As you can see, they took a beating, but even with the extra armor, I still got some body damage on both sides of the Jeep in about the same place. So the hunt was on for some new sliders. I had three main things I was looking for in new sliders. Number one, I wanted them to be frame mounted. Number two, I wanted them to be bomb-proof. And number three, I wanted a built-in step. Based on those three criteria, I narrowed it down to the Rusty's Off-Road SideStep rocker armor. Now that I have the packaging busted open, let's take a look at the actual rocker and have a quick overview of how it actually bolts on. As you can see, this thing is super beefy. Rusty's has this awesome E-coating that just looks great and is super durable. Now, they also offer a version of this that has an angled up at 45-degree angle tube, and it probably offers better rocker protection. However, like I mentioned, I wanted a built-in step, so I have the version that it goes parallel to the ground. Now, for attachment, you're going to use each of the body mounts through here. In the mid and rear, we're going to have two OEM bolts that come through here. And then on front, mid, and rear, we're going to be drilling these holes into the corresponding brackets on the frame. So what we'll need for today's installation is some safety glasses, a pair of gloves, a drill, a ratchet or two, and some extensions. At least one 9/16 inch socket, helps to have a couple, a 9/16 inch wrench, 16mm socket, an 18mm socket, a measuring tape or ruler, a metal file, a center punch, some various drill bits, including a 3/8 inch drill bit, some touch-up paint, a breaker bar, and a torque wrench, or a few. Optionally, you may want to have an impact, something to pry with, in my case, this flathead screwdriver, something to use as a cheater, in my case, this handle from my jack, and possibly even a torch. So the first step of the install is, I think fair to say, the scariest part for most people. And that's going to be to remove the body bolts. And there's three of them on each side. You're going to do one side at a time. And these can be very stubborn directly from the factory. You're going to want to use an 18mm socket. Definitely use a 6-point socket. Don't use a 12-point socket. And you're going to want a breaker bar and possibly even a cheater bar. You also may need heat. If they're not budging, you might just want to heat them up with a torch and break any thread locker that's on there from the factory. I got lucky and mine were not too bad. Now, I have heard horror stories of people having cross-threaded bolts from the factory, and that's just going to suck all the way around. So not much you can do about that other than having it drilled out and replaced. But if it doesn't want to come out, hit it with some heat, get that thread locker broken up, and then try again. Another trick is to, when you're loosening it, for every full turn, go back and tighten a half turn. And that's going to help clear any of the little thread locker debris in the threads, and it's going to help prevent you from snapping those bolts unintentionally. Now we're working on that middle driver's side body bolt. And I should probably add, mine are pretty loose because I just took my rock slide engineering steps off. And those also use the body bolts. So that is why mine are so loose. I didn't bother torquing them to spec after taking those off because I knew I was putting these rails right back on. So they might fight you a little bit if you're doing this, so just be prepared. Don't be discouraged, just be prepared. Scary sounds. So let's twist it back. And continue on our way. I'm going to go back in to be safe. All right, so now that we're at this point where we can pretty much turn these by freehand, I'm just going to go ahead and switch to my ratchet for just the sake of weight. And what we're going to do is we're going to apply some downward pressure on this giant flat washer while turning it, and that should get us the rest of the way out. That one didn't take too much. Same thing, we're going to give it some downward pressure. There we go. So now that we have all three body mounts out, now we're going to work on the middle and rear, and we're going to remove these two bolts in the middle here and then the two in the rear. These are the 16 millimeter. And I'm going to start those with the breaker bar. And I'm not too concerned about breaking these, so I'll probably finish them up with the impact. Oh, yeah. Yeah, those aren't even tight. They're not really tight. And these are actually just nuts. Be sure and put these where you can find them because we're going to reuse them. So another step you want to do before you start to put these in place is you want to use some kind of a lubricant. They recommend a white lithium aerosol and to spray it up under the body mounts. I'm just going to apply it to the surface of this mount, which will be mating into the body mount just because to me that'll be easier. I just have some red and tacky grease. It's just a red lithium grease, so this should be fine. Just going to get a little coating on here on each mount so it's not scratching the powder coat off while we're adjusting this into place. You just want to put that on all the surfaces that will be coming in contact with the body bracket. And be sure to hit all three of these on the driver's side and all three on the passenger side. So for this part of the install, it is definitely advisable to have a helping hand. So I'm having my buddy Jack here to assist me today. And we're going to raise the step up into place, position it, and then throw a couple of body bolts in there, and then we'll get to work on bolting in the rest of it. So that's the front, this is the mid and rear. Well, that's what you call a catastrophic failure. Well, no thanks to our buddy Jack here, I managed to get the steps back under place and get enough body bolts in here to hold it up. So we're going to work on tightening those up a little bit, enough to where I can get those nuts on the middle and rear mount here. So these two nuts here and the two on the rear mount, we're going to torque to 35 foot-pounds. So now we're going to torque our body bolts. The rear and the mid mount are going to be 80 to 92 foot-pounds of torque. The front mount is going to be 49 and 155 degree turn. And lastly, we're going to torque this front body bolt to 49 foot-pounds. And it does say to give it a 155 degree turn. I'm honestly just going to guesstimate that. Now we're going to center punch and drill out our holes. There's going to be 6 total on a side. 5 of those will be pre-drilled in the step slider, so you can use that as a guide on where to center punch. The 6th one is going to be the most forward one, and you're going to use this guide from the instruction manual on where to center punch and drill that one out. The rest of those will be a little bit easier, as you'll just, like I mentioned, use the pre-drilled hole. There will be one here. Going to be another one right there, and another one right there. And lastly, we have one here and here. So one other thing we want to do after we get our hole drilled is we want to be sure and deburr any edges, and then we're going to hit this all with some touch-up paint before we actually put in the bolt. You also want to give that time to dry. Now we can begin installing the rest of the hardware. All 6 of these bolts are going to be torqued to 40 foot-pounds. We have the driver's side finished, so let's take a closer look at all the mounting points. On the front body mount, we have the body mount, obviously. First hole drilled here, and second hole drilled right there. Moving to the middle, our hole drilled there, hole drilled there. Then we're gonna have the body mount and those 2 OEM bolts. And finally, looking at the rear, drilled there, another one drilled there, and then body mount plus the 2 OEM bolts. Now we're going to repeat the entire process for the passenger side. So when it comes to mounting these body bolts and getting them into position, one thing I've noticed is these OEM bolts on either side at the rear and the middle, you're going to have a hard time getting these lined up. I don't blame Rusty's on this. This is likely just due to variances in Jeep's manufacturing. I find it more likely that all these are built exactly the same versus all Jeeps having these exactly in the same spot. But basically what we end up with is you either have your buddy Jack or a friend holding up on one side. That's the front. There's no, these two bolts aren't on the front, just the one body bolt. So I got the front body bolt loosely in just so this doesn't collapse on me. And then I'm holding this in and trying to guide these in here. Then I move the jack to the middle. Easier said than done. But just to give me a place to rest and try to work on getting the bolts lined up in these holes. Then what I did is, so what I found, and this happened on both sides, unfortunately. I had them about to where they're going to go in here. It wasn't all the way seated up into it. It was just on that that edge of the thread here. Now, while those were like that, these were just completely off. So what I had to do was take my chewed up screwdriver. I use this one for prying. You're not supposed to use a screwdriver for prying, but this is a dedicated screwdriver. So what I actually did was get up in here against this thing, this part of the mount, and I didn't really want to pry, but I couldn't find another way. And but luckily it doesn't look like I chipped anything too bad. But anyway, I just would pry and pull the this onto those bolts, and ever so slightly I would get it a little closer, and then it would pop onto a thread. Give it a little more, get it up a thread, another thread or two. Then I'd come back over to this side and do the same thing until I'm able to get one or two nuts on, secure enough that I know it'll hold it. And once it's threaded on there, once you got some threads captured on one side, then you can just work on prying whichever way you need to get this to pull so that those bolts come through the bracket and we can get a nut on them. Now that we have nuts on all of them, we're just going to tighten them up, kind of like a tire or a wheel. We're going to tighten a little here, a little over here, then a little over here, and just slowly and gradually pull this thing up all the way flush. And once these are set, then we can fully tighten that body bolt, and then we can put in these two body bolts as well. But this was definitely the most frustrating part of this install. It would probably be easier on a lift where you have more room to stand up and get more leverage and have, you know, a buddy or two. But I actually got my wife to help me on the other side last night, and she was not a fan. But this side, now that I know the trick, it was a little bit easier going on. Just like the other side, we're going to torque those 4 nuts to 35 foot-pounds. The front body bolt, we're going to torque to 49 foot-pounds with a 155-degree turn, which once again, I'm just going to estimate. And then the middle and rear body mount, we're going to go 90 foot-pounds. It says 80 to 92, so we're going 90. Just like we did the other side, now we're going to center punch and drill out our 6 holes. I'm going to go ahead and hit these other ones with some touch-up paint so they can go ahead and start drying. Don't forget though, we're gonna have to file and deburr those edges. So while those other holes we drilled are drying, I just wanted to give you a little tip. The directions call for drilling a pilot hole 1/8 inch and then using the 3/8 to drill the full hole. Now, if you're on a lift, have air tools, you're probably not going to have any problems. But sitting here in my garage, I found it's much easier to just start with something just very tiny and then just gradually move up. I just skip a few sizes and just, I pass through about 4 or 5 different bits before I hit the 3/8 bits, and it just makes it a lot easier. I have my hole center punched, and one thing I'll mention is this section has another bracket welded on top of it, so it is going to be a little bit thicker of material than the other holes we drilled. But that's not a big deal. Just go slow and, you know, slowly step up the drill size. We're officially in the home stretch. All we have left to do is put in our 6 bolts and torque them all to 40 foot-pounds. Officially finished. Everything has been drilled, painted, torqued. We are all ready to go. I don't believe I've seen a video of the flat fenders or the flat rocker steps with a walk around like this. So if anybody is interested in these, this is definitely a chance to see what they look like. They do look really, really good. And they are very solid as well. I know I saw one video where, I don't remember the channel, I'll find it and link it, but they literally put a Jeep, a JL 4-door, on a lift using just the rails. So these are definitely sturdy. And talking about my other Rusty's products, you see I got the rear trail bumper and this rear fascia guard, and it's that same durable E-coat that you see here. So now the steps are shiny because they're new, but it'll match really well over time. But these things are sick, and they have plenty of room for a nice step. So if we're off on the trail and we are getting out to look at something or do something, spot, whatever, have a nice little walk around here. Let's look again at the mounting situation here. This is the driver's side at the front. Middle. And rear. And let's walk around and look at the other side. This is the rear on the passenger side. The middle on the passenger side. And while I'm right here, one thing you'll note, and it does mention this in the instructions, those bolts will be angled a little bit. That's normal, and you're going to be drilling kind of at an angle anyway. So unless you have a right angle drill, they're not going to be perfectly straight in, which they're not supposed to be. It's fine like that. And then lastly, the front. So there's the bolt, the hole that's already pre-drilled into the Rusty's mount. But on this front one, I'll show you. Here's that one we had to drill through both our the OEM frame bracket here and the Rusty's mount here. But you see how it's got that, it's kind of like a stacked bracket here. So you're drilling through a little bit more material. No big though. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. If you're on the fence about rock sliders for your Jeep, I hope this video helps you make your decision. The Rusty's Off-Road SideStep rock sliders are awesome. The build quality is excellent, the finish is just fantastic, and these things are super sturdy. I will say, install, not super easy. You definitely want to have an extra pair of hands, and once again, I blame this more on Jeep than Rusty's, just because of different tolerances and variances between different Jeeps. With all that said, if you have any questions about the install, leave a comment, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.